Hello and welcome to another episode of Back of the Grid. I'm your host this week, Tom, and I am joined as always by Chris.
Hello.
And by Stu.
Hi there.
We, this week, are going to do a little bit of a mid-season performance report. We're going to go through all the drivers that have driven in some capacity this season. I'm guessing you know why I said it like that. And rank them tier maker style. Because everyone on YouTube loves a tier maker list, right?
We do still love a good tier list, even though it's each year we do it, it goes another year out of date as a format. But
it's fine.
It works well.
It's fine.
This is going to be our most visual formatted podcast since we've moved to YouTube as well. So if you've never watched the episode on YouTube before, this is probably the one if you're going to pick one to dive in.
Don't promise too much, Chris. Come on.
I mean, there'll be something other than our faces to look at, I guess is what I'm saying.
I'm going to share my screen and it's going to be a tier maker window. There's not much more to it than that. But seeing as how we are talking about YouTube, please, if you are new to us here on YouTube, remember to subscribe, hit the bell for every week's episode so you get it first. And of course, if you're liking a particular episode, leave a comment. We've started getting inbox questions, which we'll get to later, that have come from comments. So we'll always check those. So yeah, be sure to interact here as well as all the other places.
And we're really, really close to a little minor milestone of 150 followers, which sounds really lame for YouTube, but we've not been using YouTube for very long, and we get loads and loads of listens as a podcast. So we're just trying to grow that YouTube as well, and it'd be great to hit that mini little milestone this week. So
tell your friends.
You can tell your friends, and you can be the one to get us over that little milestone.
Mindstone? I hope it's not a milestone.
Anyway,
let's get on with some rankings. Now, any preference on which way around we do this? Because there's a lot of different ways we could do it. The easiest way is probably to go team by team.
No, I feel like we probably should have planned before we started this recording.
I'm just seeing if you two have preference more than anything.
Team by team championship order, I think, is probably the most interesting because I feel like it's going to get more interesting the further we go down the list.
Yeah, okay. I feel like there'll be a few at the beginning that are somewhat obvious, but we'll see. Right. I suppose this cues me to share my screen, doesn't it? So we can see the tier maker. There it is.
Is this going to work? Yes, it has worked. Amazing.
It has indeed been successful.
I have a black screen, and now I have an actual screen. So here we go. Here we go. This is really happening.
Okay, so let's just kick it off then. Red Bull. So 12 wins as a team, 19 podiums. Nearly all of that is Max Verstappen single-handedly. 10 race wins to Max Verstappen. Oh, wait, no, sorry. No, this is head-to-head, isn't it? So, yeah, it will be 10 race wins to Max Verstappen and 2 to Perez.
Yeah, that's right.
Verstappen 10 times beating Perez in quali. Nearly all of those podiums, obviously coming in some capacity from Verstappen. And a huge point gap of 314 to 189. So, where are we going to put them both, gents?
I mean, there's no way Verstappen isn't anything other than S tier.
Yeah.
Let's get that out of the way straight away.
So might as well just do that straight away.
We are witnessing one of the all-time great F1 seasons. There's no way he can't be top tier.
Superlative number one of the day for Max Verstappen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's been untouchable. He's just on another level. You can't argue with it, can you? He's just absolutely dominating.
Perez, however,
the
first controversial one
of this conversation is occurring.
Yeah. The first bit.
So I'm trying to not have recency bias with this because it's really easy to judge based on the most recent races that you have seen most recently. They're fresher in your mind. Perez did have a good start to the season. So the first 5 races, 2 wins, 2 seconds, and a 5th. He was not a million miles off Verstappen, actually beat him sometimes. That's no mean feat. Obviously, since those first 5 races, it's gone not quite as well.
Understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, let's just throw some letters out there and see where we end up. So
Okay.
I am going to struggle to put Perez anywhere higher than a B right now.
I guess for people only listening, we
mid-tier.
should say that our rankings here are S, A, B, C, D.
Yeah, so
The bog standard
5.
tier
Yeah.
makers.
Yeah, so he's right in the middle there for me on a B. I really would struggle to put him anywhere higher than that, given the dominance of Verstappen and the places where we've been seeing Perez end up through his own, through his own mistakes and through his own inconsistent performances.
Yeah.
I think
Can you really justify anything higher than a B?
No. I
no,
can't.
and I think I guess one element to almost save him from going lower, I think, is the fact that if you just purely looked at his finishing results for the season and didn't take into account what you'd seen as a performance, his results wouldn't actually look that bad overall, because they're basically all top 6 finishers other than Monaco, which was a bit of a disaster anyway.
Yeah.
So it sort of highlights that the real big problem he's had is qualifying pace and then having to fight back through the field. Like, his racecraft hasn't actually been too bad, but in reality, if he's in the car that he's in, even starting from near the back, you would probably expect him to be pushing towards a podium more often. So I think that's probably the only thing that saves him from like dropping all the way down to C, is the fact that it feels like it's only one half of his performances that have been like particularly poor, and that's qualifying.
Okay, so I think I was being generous with a B, man.
I think you could make a strong argument for a C. Like, he's the only other driver to have won a race this season. Like, if you consider Max Verstappen is basically like the final boss of Formula One right now. Perez admittedly in the best equipment on the grid, is the only person to have beaten him and has done on a couple of occasions.
Yeah. Perez is the starting Pokemon of Formula One.
And Max is Mewtwo.
Max is literally Mewtwo. Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. Like, that's what these tiers should have been, just like different Pokemon. Yeah.
I could be convinced by a B or a C for Perez, so...
Okay, I'm going to say C just because I'm cruel. Tom, you've got the final decision on this.
Oh, that makes it harder, because I was happy to go with B. Do you know what? I'm going to put him in C with you.
What? Oof. I didn't think you'd
Why
do
not?
that. Oh,
No, I'm going to do it.
Oh, no, I wasn't expecting that.
What have we done?
Well, I mean, what I must say is, what I was saying is I was trying to convince myself of why I could agree with you on B. So all that spiel I just kind of came up with was me going, okay, I can help justify what Stu's saying with a B initially here. So
it was an initial B, and now he's a resulting C.
This is what happens.
Yeah, well, I think it is justified. I don't think the performance just hasn't been there, and even the times when Verstappen has started, the few times where Verstappen started further down the grid, Verstappen's then gone on to overtake his teammate and win the race, and Perez is never. You don't see that ever happening this season.
Yeah.
I can't see a world where Perez, from this point on, I can't see a world where Perez overtakes his teammate. And there's an argument to say that he's, the car isn't not really Perez's car, it's Verstappen's car, and it's been designed much more around Verstappen. And I think that is totally fair to say. I think it's obvious, but even so, you're still in the best car. By a long way, the best car. You should be doing a lot better.
Yeah. And wasn't there a stat recently of the last time we were in this scenario, Gasly was closer to Verstappen than Perez is
the
now.
mid-season break, yeah.
Well,
So-
In the season, Gasly was dropped.
Which I think probably says more about Verstappen's pure dominance this season than it
and
does
the level of
Perez.
competition as well.
And just kind of where that car is. I think it says more than just Perez is not as good as Gasly. I think that's very much misreading that statistic.
Very much so.
It's still an interesting statistic, nonetheless.
Do you think Bruno Senna would be doing better than?
I mean,
dig that feature.
Do I have to dig that jingle out?
No. Let's not. Okay, we should move on.
Let's move on.
Okay, let's talk about Mercedes next, as surprisingly they are next in the standings, which I didn't think I'd be saying at this point in this season.
No.
So we've got Hamilton v Russell here. 9 races better for Hamilton compared to Russell's 3. 7 qualies better for Hamilton to Russell's 5. 4 podiums for Hamilton, just the 1 for Russell, and a points gap of 148 for Hamilton to 99 for Russell. So yeah, like kind of where I'd expect them to be compared to each other. I don't know about you two. I don't know if you think that Russell should be closer, but I sort of think this is about right.
I think Russell's having a little bit of a disappointing season, to be honest. After obviously the season he had last year, he was very much building throughout the year, kind of culminated in picking up that win towards the end of the year. I don't really feel like this season he's kind of kept that momentum going quite as much. Hamilton, I think, is honestly wringing everything out of that car this year. I don't think there's much more he could have done with the car he's had. Russell, I think I'd have hoped to see more out of Russell with that car this year.
I can't disagree with any of that. But where do we want to rank them?
Yeah, I was about to say let's turn this into letters.
I think Hamilton is at least an A. I think you could, if you wanted to, try and make an argument to put Hamilton in S tier. If you're gonna take the are they doing the most they can with the car they have argument, I think you could make that argument. I'm borderline.
Yeah, I think this is a very. I think Hamilton has had 1 or 2 sort of blips in his season so far. I think the incident with Perez in the last race was a little bit kind of. It was a difficult situation, but I think it was I think it was possible to make that overtake clean if he just doesn't go up the curb. So
if Hamilton had been in a championship fight, that incident with Perez absolutely would not have happened.
Oh, no, well, I mean, he never would have been. Perez wouldn't have been he wouldn't have been finishing. He wouldn't have been qualifying behind Perez for that to happen if he was in a championship.
True, but I think in that moment, if he was in a championship fight mindset, he wouldn't have put his car in a position for that incident to happen. I guess
that's fair enough. Yeah. That's a very recent one, but I think overall his drive this season has been, he's looked more motivated. I think this season to do well. I think you can see you can see those signs that Hamilton's seeing the progress within the team, and that they do seem to be moving forward. I think he's got the faith that maybe next year they might sort of be starting to get on top of things. Maybe be winning races next year. So that's obviously a big motivation for him to keep pushing. I think I can put him a very high A, but I don't think I can quite justify S.
I think I agree.
I think it'd be weird to put him in the same tier as Verstappen, just because the level of dominance Verstappen is showing, that it's just transcends all other. It really, really does transcend any other drive in the history of Formula One, I think. At the moment.
We almost needed like an S+ tier to put Max in, just so anyone else stands a chance.
Well, I mean, saying that, when you look down the rest of the drivers list, I don't feel like anybody else is getting in that S category. But
I've got one. I've got one. I'm going to make an argument for.
I mean, I could be interested to hear other opinions, but we'll see. So I think resoundingly, we're all saying an A.
Top of A, yeah.
And then, maybe like upper echelons of A that, given 1 or 2 moments, maybe could have been an S, but overall an A.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then I'm going to say Russell a solid B, because that makes me feel slightly better about putting Perez as a C.
Here's where context starts to come in, because I would say I agree with that, because Russell, yes, could definitely be doing more with the car, but he's definitely not in a position where he feels to be as underperformant as what Perez is. So I think this sort of these three drivers here of Lewis, Russell, Perez kind of illustrate the benchmarks of ABC quite well, and you're going to have to be like really underperforming to be down in D. I think that's kind of where I'm seeing it. So
I can go B for Russell. I think the question I'm asking myself is, if you were to put Russell in the Red Bull in place of Perez, would he be doing better? And I think he would be. So there you go. That's my justification. Fight me in the comments.
With that, let's move on to Aston Martin. So strong start to the season with 6 podiums, 11 race victories in comparison to, race performances. I'll get that right. 11 race performances for Alonso, Stroll with just the 1. 10 quali victories for Alonso, 2 for Stroll. All 6 of those podiums mentioned were Alonso, and quite a big points gap of 149 points for Alonso and 47 to Stroll. So, difficult times currently, I think, for the team, as they appear to be caught up by the rest of the midfield teams and not having that best of the rest advantage that they had earlier in the year.
Feel like inbox for further discussion points on that, actually.
Yeah. I feel like Alonso started off really strong, really team focused, really positive, and as the current situation has gone on, that slowly faded away to the point where you can see he's getting a bit down about the situation now, and the negativity's creeping in. I mean, most recently in Spa, the comments regarding, like, you know, where do you think you can recover to in the race tomorrow? And the response was a blunt, I can't, or we can't, something to that. Like, it's difficult with Alonso because I think early in the season he was really performing well with the car, possibly even maybe outperforming what it was capable of. And now the other teams are catching them up, as a team. It's just showing where maybe that car wasn't actually as good overall as maybe we thought it was. And I feel like maybe a part of it was Alonso and his performance. I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
Okay. Well, I think Alonso is still outperforming the car. I think recently the performances have dropped off a bit, but I think part of that is because Aston Martin don't seem to have developed as fast as what Mercedes and certainly McLaren have managed. So I think there's a tail off there in the performance for the team. I think they've had a couple of iffy races as well. So it could just be a bit of a blip they're having in the mid-season. To me, none of this looks quite terminal yet for Aston Martin. I think there's still a fundamentally good car there, and they just need to do a little bit better at maximizing what they're getting out of it. Like the last race, no one had that much setup time, so it kind of like jumbled up the order a little bit anyway. In terms of who are we doing first, Stroll or Alonso?
Let's do Alonso first, because I kind of started talking about Alonso initially and his performance and his attitude and stuff.
Chris, you had something you wanted to say there?
Yeah, I'll like throw the cat amongst pigeons and say Alonso is the other driver that I want to make an argument for S tier for.
Interesting.
I think Alonso has wrung every 10th out of that car. Like, he's only got 1 less podium than Perez in a Red Bull. And even these, like, you know, bottom end of the points finishes he's had recently, even then it's like he's fought tooth and nail to finish 7th instead of 8th. Like, I really feel like I think Alonso has driven better this year than most of his previous seasons in F1.
Okay.
I really do think he's one of the drivers getting the absolute maximum out of that car. So I'm going to be the person to make the S tier argument.
So I can't decide for me if I agree with the argument, but I can't decide for me if this sort of makes Alonso an A and Stroll a D, or Alonso a C and Alonso an S and Stroll a C. So like I've got basically two spaces between them. It's either S and C or A and D. It's kind of how I'm feeling.
A third option.
Go on.
You could potentially put Alonso as an S. I don't necessarily disagree Alonso as an S, but I don't think he's at the same level as what Verstappen is. So for the same reason that I couldn't give Hamilton an S, I think is the reason I can't give Alonso an S. So for me, Alonso is an A. And then Stroll, I'd probably put down as a D. He's just been absolutely mullered by his teammate. He's rolled over like a little puppy to his teammate, and there's nothing to compete with him.
Yeah,
I haven't got like the pace gaps, but I would say the Alonso to Stroll gap is one of, if not the biggest on the grid.
Well, interesting you say that, because my argument for the gap I was giving them was going to be to do with championship points. So as far behind Verstappen as Perez is, it's not quite half the point, not even half the points yet that he's behind him, if that makes sense.
But there's a lot less points on offer further down. So
true, but when you look at the gaps between the team, these kind of higher end teams, let's say, Stroll is like on a third of the points of his teammate. It's not even half for Perez, and we think Perez is massively underperforming. The Russell to Hamilton gap, it's like 2/3. The Ferrari gap, they're like neck and neck. The McLaren gap is only half, and one of the ones that's only on half is a rookie. Like there's a noticeable difference in that gap between the two drivers, I think, in a car that even if it's Alonso like getting extra out of it, Stroll should still be doing better, which is why my initial thoughts were A and D. And if I went with Chris's S for Alonso, it'd have sort of ultimately dragged Stroll up a bit, but I prefer A and D, and I think, Stu, you agreed with me, so that's kind of where I've dropped them in.
Yeah. I was originally going to suggest S and D, but I think A and D, which is why I was like, maybe there's a third option, but I think the correct option is A and D. I'm sorry, Chris.
No, that's fine. I was prepared to be outvoted on that.
Chris is looking, quitting the podcast. I'm just looking. We were talking about Bottas.
I'm not looking forward to talking about Bottas.
Did you want to add something else there, Chris? I feel
obviously Stroll is kind of an easy guy to dump on a lot of the time, and we have kind of defended him in the past. But looking this season, let's say the opening 6 races when Alonso got 5 podiums. In those same 5 races, Stroll had 4th, 6th, 7th, 12th, and 2 retirements. Those results in a podium-capable car is just...
Yeah, and I sort of gave a little bit of a benefit of doubt in early season races just because of the cycling accident he had just before the season started.
That's fair.
There was like an element of benefit of doubt for those first few results, but even at this point, he's still barely finishing in the points.
Yeah, he's had plenty of time to improve and get better at Formula 1,
and hasn't.
He just hasn't. So I think consistently. The guy's consistently underperforming. I'm not going to turn this into a session of giving.
We're flogging the dead horse now.
But I'm not bringing anything new to the table by saying that, so we should probably just move on.
I was going to make a joke then about flogging a dead horse and moving to Ferrari, but I've kind of done it now anyway.
Here we are.
There we go. Worst attempt at a joke ever. Right, Ferrari. So 3 podiums for them as a team this season so far. Leclerc, 7 race performances over his team to Sainz's 5. 7-5 again to Leclerc in qualifying. All three of those podiums we mentioned come from Leclerc. But as I alluded to before, the points gap is extremely close. So you've got Leclerc on 99 points and Sainz on 92. And I do think, actually, for the most part of the season, Sainz has actually been ahead. It's only a big swing in Spa that's really
it was
scuppered that a little bit. And Sainz has generally been ahead of his teammate. So I think it's quite close with the two of these. Personally, I think Sainz has been marginally the better driver, as until last race, the standings were just about showing.
Sainz consistency.
I don't think that was particularly Sainz's driving as such. I think he got damaged very early in the race, didn't he? And then kind of like wrecked his race. So
it killed the race.
I do think Sainz's turn one could have been better.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's partly got himself to blame for that turn one, but as I spoke about in the last podcast, but still, I don't think you can't really taint his season with that one.
No.
Thing. So,
and he's been
I think these two
very consistent all season.
Yeah, but I do think these two are probably going to be very close to each other, possibly in the exact same tier.
Yeah.
I think one might be a high of that tier and one might be a low of that tier, but we don't have that option. Unless we want to, have 99 tiers, then we'll be able to divide these two.
I'm thinking maybe they both go in B, and I think I would possibly have Sainz ahead of Russell and Leclerc behind him. Ooh. How does that sound?
That's doable, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, so we'll organize. I'll organize them visually like that. How's this look? So so like, is Russell in between the two Ferrari drivers, or is Leclerc better than Russell?
No, I think Leclerc's
actually
Russell.
Thinking about it. I think I would have Leclerc ahead of Russell.
Maybe,
in terms of
really thought about that.
B tier categorization. So now we're subcategorizing. We're saying Sainz, Leclerc, Russell.
Well, let's not worry too much about that. They're both a B. Then
that was more a thought exercise. But
yeah.
Oh no, it's
let's
a thing
not
now.
Get bogged down in like what order the B's should be in.
No, it's going to happen. Right. I mean, that was pretty much the quickest one. Anyone got anything else to add on Ferrari?
Well, I mean, we don't have much time. We need to keep going.
No,
fair enough.
We've talked enough about Ferrari this season, as we always do.
Let's move on to McLaren then. So 2 podiums for them this season. In terms of race results, it's Norris 9, Piastri 3. Quali is 10-2 to Norris. The 2 podiums were both Norris's, and the points is 69 points for Norris and 34 for Piastri.
Nice.
How do we feel about these? I think definitely I have some favouring in Piastri's rating wherever it goes because of the fact that he's a rookie. And when you compare what he is doing to where you'd expect a rookie to be, I think it immediately sort of bumps him up a tier, just the fact that he's a rookie doing what he's doing. So I'd be interested to see where... I want to start with Piastri now. I've started that line.
Well, again, I think these two are similar. I think these two are wherever we put them, it's going to be more or less. I would say that they'll be more or less in the same tier for one reason or another. It's an interesting season for McLaren because they started quite poorly, very poorly, in fact, you'd argue. And they brought their update. Some people called it just a copy of a Red Bull. I don't believe that's really possible in Formula 1 to just copy another car and suddenly find loads of speed. I think whatever they found and however they found it has been through their own development. Yes, of course, there are similarities in between the two cars, and there's design philosophies being adopted, and obviously certain design philosophies work better than others, and that's how McLaren have progressed. In terms of driver performance, it's really tough because you're not really paying too much attention to them when they're right down at the back. So
their results are so bizarre.
Yeah, it's really strange one. I think right now, these last sort of 2 or 3 races, both drivers seem to have found a really, really good seam of form. I would probably put both of them in A category myself.
Chris?
Both in A, you want to put them?
Yeah. As in the category that is named A, not a category. Like
I want to put them in A category. Ooh, do I think they're both A tier?
right now, I think they are. I don't think they have been across the whole season, but I think, and maybe I'm getting like recent race bias here, which we promised we wouldn't do at the start of the thing. But
yeah,
but again, it's like, do you think they were getting the most out of the car they could? I mean, when after 2 17th place in a row, Lando managed to pull a 6th place out of the bag in Australia. Like
And-
that was
and-
well, that was a
almighty
lottery,
drive.
though. That
and
It was a
Piastri
bit of a
scoring
loss,
points
right?
there as well. You got to remember. So
Yeah, actually.
you know, they both had absolutely awful opening races, and then they got the best out of it that they could in Australia and finished 6th and 8th. Like
I think they've got
for both of them
two
to be getting
superstar
points.
drivers.
Yeah, for both of them to be getting points before those upgrades, I think warrants them being at least considered for this category that Hamilton and Alonso are currently in for this season.
Yeah, do you know what? I can be convinced. Like, think of the drivers we've got in B. I think they're both driving phenomenally well. I do agree that they both should be in the same category because even though Lando is pretty consistently outperforming Piastri, you've also got to remember Piastri's done 12 Grand Prix and he is so close to him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those where if we'd had the 6 levels, they would sort of sit somewhere between Hamilton and Alonso and then those that we've put in this B tier. They'd be somewhere in between, but
They're
we
not
don't.
very granular though.
So it gets
Let's
too
not get
granular.
too granular. Don't
So
get bogged down.
They're going in A then.
In an imaginary world
I think
where
so.
we've
Going
got
in
6
A.
tiers.
But below the other two. Because we've got
Sure.
subcategorization, remember?
Okay. Let's move on then. Next one.
Right, let's do another team. Weirdly, I feel like their position in the standings doesn't reflect how mental the season's been for them as a team, but we've got Alpine next. So a podium for them, for one, which again is crazy. Ocon with 5-4 leading over Gasly in race results, tied at 6-6 in quali. The podium that they did get was Ocon's in Monaco. Quite close on points, 35-22. A very weird situation. I find this one hard, mainly because of what's going on with the team around them. Like, there's been moments in the season where they've looked really good, like they've got potential. Then there's been moments where they've looked like an absolute shambles, and then there's other times where they've just been anonymous and you'd kind of forgot they were even on circuit. Like, it's been so mixed for them, and
I'm going to
it's
say
really hard
right now for all of these reasons, for the reasons of the just the inconsistency coming from the drivers. Given, fair enough, it probably is difficult to be consistent in a team that has really struggled all season and had all kinds of changes managerially and things. But I think I can't give them either of these two. I can't put any higher than a C.
Gasly, I definitely agree with you. I think Gasly's having a really disappointing season, especially after his last couple of years when he was like really doing the business at AlphaTauri. He's having a pretty disappointing year. I think I want to put Ocon in B. I think despite everything, Ocon is driving pretty damn well this year. His podium in Monaco was a heck of a drive.
I'm going to ask for some nuance on the situation with the two of them that I don't know if either of you will be able to answer, and I know I can't answer myself. They've had 2 incidents this season where they've essentially taken each other out, right? Although actually one wasn't their fault, was it?
One wasn't their fault. No.
It was a
That was Australia,
domino
wasn't it?
effect.
Yeah,
Australia was the
crazy.
only one where they took each other out on their own. Can you remember which way around that incident was and whose fault it was?
Not off the top of my head.
Not off the top of my head, I don't know.
Because
I think Ocon kind of squeezed Gasly as Gasly was coming back on track. I think that's how that happened.
the reason I ask is because I'd be tempted to put them in the same tier and maybe drop the driver that caused that incident.
What, down
because-
one?
Yeah, basically. Like
So that would be Ocon. I think Ocon caused that. Someone on the I think Gasly went off track and then rejoined and then went up the inside of Ocon, and Ocon didn't know he was there. And then,
but I think Ocon was also kind of driving into a gap that might also disappear. I think if you're going to split them up,
I've made it more awkward.
We need to look this up.
If you're going to put them in different tiers, for me, Ocon has to be the higher of the two. Ocon's definitely driving better than Gasly this year.
I mean, Ocon's the one with the podium. Ocon was the one with the stellar performance in Monaco. So there's something to be said for that. Maybe that is the separating factor, like you say, the fact that he has somehow put that car on the podium, albeit in Monaco, where it's difficult to overtake, but it took a storming qualifying position to put him up there in the first place. So
I think the question is whether you guys want to put Ocon up into a B or whether you think they both need to go in C.
I don't think either of them are underperforming as much as Stroll is. So if I was going to do it, I would go Ocon B, Gasly C, if we were going to split them, I think.
I'm happy with that.
Stu, upon rewatching the Australian incident, do you have any input to that? Because I can tell that's what you're doing. You're just double checking that situation for us.
Yeah, well, I don't want to give it to the wrong person. So...
Yeah, I agree. You're doing the due diligence for us.
The problem there is you're looking for a turn one after a grid start incident in Australia, of which there are about 17. So
I think, despite what I was saying about that incident, I can justify Ocon being in a higher tier than Gasly.
We've been told by Discord that Gasly apologised that incident, which I think says everything we need to know.
Well, he took the blame. Doesn't matter whose fault it was. He took the blame.
This video doesn't make it clear as to who actually did it, because the way they changed the angles makes it.
Let's say we're disregarding that as being a factor.
Yeah. Okay. I'm probably putting him. I mean, I can agree with that. B and a C. Yeah, I think if we're getting granular, Ocon's probably still a low B.
Yeah, he's a bottom end of a B, but I think he's done enough.
As you can clearly see, I have ranked him towards the bottom of the B tier.
I can see that. Yeah.
Don't you worry.
Yeah. Let's do the next one, then I'm happy.
Okay, then. Right. Next team in the list is Williams. So we've got Albon and Sargent here. 10 race performances for Albon, just the one for Sargent. Clean sweep for Albon in quali, 12-0 against his teammate. Obviously, no podiums here. And sadly, no points for Sargent yet, but they don't feel too far away if the right weekend can come together, especially with how the car's looking better now. 11 points for Albon so far.
Okay, so Albon's killing it. Albon is way outperforming that car, I think.
I think the only blot against Albon this season is when he crashed out all by himself in Australia when he was looking pretty good for the points.
Yes.
That's the only kind of blot against his name that I can think of. But you are right. Otherwise, he is really, really doing the business this year.
I think he's maximising, for the most part, he's maximising every weekend. I think like last weekend, both cars struggled because the cake tin on the rear brakes split.
Yeah.
And it was overheating their tyres and just led to huge degradation. So because at one point they were looking decent, weren't they? And suddenly they just disappeared and they were nowhere.
Yeah, it was after the first round of stops, wasn't it, that they both started struggling? Because we thought it was a compound thing at first because it came after the stops, but yeah, it was obviously a little more to it than that.
Yeah. So I'm gonna throw Albon straight into the A.
Albon's an A for me. A for Albon.
Firmly in the A tier for me.
Yeah. The question is, where do we put his rookie teammate, Logan Sargent?
I think because he's a rookie, C.
Yeah. I can live with that.
You need to be closer to your teammate. That's the one person that is absolute domination. The same reason I've put Stroll in a D is because he was absolutely dominated by his teammate. And I think the only thing, I'm going to be kind and give him C because he's a rookie and he's
not had multiple seasons in the sport to be like honed in his craft like Stroll has. And therein lies the difference, doesn't it? Yeah.
And he is gradually getting closer to Albon. Not as quick as I would like to see, but he is very gradually closing that gap. So I can just about be convinced by a C.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got promise. Like he could in the future be a really, really good Formula One driver. I think he's certainly not the worst rookie we've seen.
That's for sure.
He's sort of the American hope, isn't he, for the Americans that they love?
Yeah,
they love him. He's
until Andretti hopefully gets a spot on the grid.
Chris does not sound confident in that assessment of him at all.
It's just a shame that he is the entire hope for American fans in F1 right now.
True. Yeah. And as you may have noticed, I put him down the lower end of C.
Yes. Okay. Let's do the next one.
Let's move on to Haas. So Hulkenberg and Magnussen here tied on their race performances against each other, 6-6. Hulkenberg with the better qualifying performances, winning 9-3. Obviously no podiums here. And in terms of points, Hulkenberg has 9, Magnussen only has 2. Magnussen obviously coming back from, I want to say time away, but he was sort of made sporadic reserve appearances as well. So, what did I say?
You said Magnussen.
Oh, sorry, other way around. Yeah, Hulkenberg coming back from not being a full-time driver, essentially, like only making sporadic reserve appearances for other teams.
Yeah.
I mean, really good performances from Hulkenberg in terms of qualifying. Like so many times he pops up in Q2 and Q3 sessions that, to be honest, sometimes you feel like he has no right in being in, like just absolutely brutal one-lap pace. And I feel like being
tire degradation.
Exactly. Feel like then being maybe let down by just what that car is capable of in a race. Because the reason I say that is because no matter where either of them qualified, they basically just go backwards. Kind of both being let down by the race pace of the car. But I think more of a silver lining with Hulk than Magnussen, because obviously Hulk's initially qualifying so well. Personally, I'd put him like on a tier one above the other, so like Hulk on maybe a B and then Magnussen on a C. I don't think Magnussen's particularly doing too much wrong. I just think Hulk is doing more of what the car is capable with when it's in quali trim.
Yeah, Hulk's doing great. I like when they announced he's coming back, I was pretty nonplussed about it, but actually he's been really impressive this year. I can definitely go Hulk a B. Magnussen has been pretty poor this year. Is he D tier poor?
I don't think he's cool. I think D's harsh, given that the car's just not great. As not great as it is.
If he's C, he's at the bottom end.
I suppose the big question would be, how is his performance? Like, if you were to be running a team of like Williams, Haas, Alfa Tauri kind of caliber as they are currently, who would you rather put in your car? Kevin Magnussen or Logan Sargent or Lance Stroll? Out of those three drivers, who would you pick?
Kevin Magnussen all day.
You probably would pick Kevin Magnussen, yeah.
So,
and I think the other thing is like they are on races they are drawn 6-6, so he can't be doing that much worse than his teammate. So I think I'd be happy with. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with a B for Hulkenberg and a C for Magnussen. I think that's fair.
Okay, that works for me. Okay. Alfa Romeo come next. Bottas and Zhou. 8 race performances to Bottas, 4 to Zhou, 7-4 to Bottas in qualifying. I'm trying to work out why those numbers don't make sense.
It's because these numbers don't include any sessions where they both retired, I believe.
In quali?
I don't know exactly how that works in qualifying. I'll be honest, I've taken these numbers from a different website. I didn't work them out myself.
From a third party.
Fair enough. We'll blame a third party, an anonymous third party for that.
Yes.
Obviously no podiums down here. And in terms of points, it's 5-4 to Bottas. So not much in it between the two of them in that regard. but for context, I guess they've both had 2 points finishes. It's just that Zhou's were 9th and 9th, Bottas's were 8th and 10th, so it works out marginally better for Bottas in that regard.
The point system doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not much to say for this team, isn't it? They've been nowhere all season. I think the sale to Audi is kind of hindering their progress this year a little bit.
It feels like it's very much stalled anything else that was ongoing to focus whatever's coming next, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And that's neither of the drivers' fault. Obviously, they've both got a bit of a lemon of a car that they're having to deal with. It's really, really hard to draw any like firm conclusions about them, but I think they've both been super anonymous all season as well.
I think this is one of Bottas's worst seasons, to be honest. As the resident Bottas fan here,
I'll take your word on it because
the guy's out there. He's never looked happier. He's living his best life, but I think he's taken his eye off the ball a little bit on track this season, if I'm completely honest. Zhou, on the other hand, I think he's doing, he's in his, second season now? I think he's doing a pretty solid job. Like, he's pretty close to a very experienced teammate.
Yeah.
He's respectable, very respectable
performance. Couple of decent qualifying performances and glimmers of good racecraft from Zhou as well. I feel like out of the two of them, Bottas has been almost completely anonymous, whereas with Zhou Guanyu, I feel like at least I've seen glimmers and moments from him, of like maybe getting into a Q3 session or a bit of fine racecraft, like going wheel to wheel with people, whether it be defending or like at least trying to make moves. So I feel if there's going to be any separation, it's going to go in his favour. But I think that overall, the tale of like the head-to-heads probably tell it that it is actually quite close between them. So they're probably in the same tier, but maybe a little bit more marginal for sure. I don't know. Go on. It sounds like you disagree too, so I'm keen to hear it.
So I'm going to base this on where they were last year because I haven't used this statistic yet so far.
Okay,
this tier list production. Bottas 5 positions lower than he was last year. Zhou 2 positions higher than he was last year. So the tale that Chris was telling of Bottas not being on the ball and not being focused this year kind of plays out, I think, in that stat. So for that reason, I am going to put Zhou at a C, and I'm actually going to put Bottas down at a D to be 5 positions further back from where he should be. I think, and just so anonymous, both of them so anonymous, so out. They're just out of the picture completely. Like they're not being particularly exciting or interesting to watch. They haven't contributed to the sport. They've also ran all season, and it's not been that exciting.
I'm gonna push for a C for Bottas and make you have the final choice there, Tom. You're welcome.
I mean, as you may have noticed, I was shuffling around with it whilst you was justifying it, and I sort of put Bottas in the D and made sure he was at least above Stroll within that D, and then Zhou towards the bottom end of the C's, maybe just above Logan Sargent. So I feel like that's the degree of separation I want, that like Bottas is the highest a D can possibly ever be, and Zhou is kind of it just in amongst the C's. Like if Bottas tried once in a while, he'd be a C too. That's why
there's time. It's mid-season. There's time for all of these to change.
That is the joy of mid-season reviews.
Yeah. But I think you would expect more from Bottas. Yeah. I think, and that's Bottas why he's where he is for me.
Bottas is in D for decline. That's what Bottas is.
Wow. There's an episode title for you. Right, last, the team, or the only team with 3 drivers to rank and rate. So we'll do this in sort of 2 parts. So up until early in the season, we had Tsunoda versus De Vries, which was 8-2 in race performances to Tsunoda, 8-2 in qualifying to Tsunoda. And in terms of points, Tsunoda at that point had 2 points and De Vries had none. Since then, we've had a couple of races with Ricciardo in the seat, replacing De Vries, and they've essentially been tied 1-1 in races, 1-1 in quali, although Tsunoda has picked up a point, whereas Ricciardo hasn't. Discuss.
Who do you want to start with?
Right.
Should we start with De Vries?
Yeah.
D for De Vries.
I think so. Like, as much as I feel sorry for the guy, I don't think you can make an argument to put him any higher than D, unfortunately.
I mean, I have no argument to move him up any higher. When I think about
performances weren't there.
Yeah, when you think about his performances, and especially when what was expected of him, I think that's got to be a factor as well. Like, yes, fair enough, it's his first full-time season, but he comes very seasoned from other sports. There's a big difference between being what is essentially a rookie season when you're world champions in other forms of wheel-to-wheel, open-wheel racing, and when you're coming from a junior category, such as Logan Sargent and Oscar Piastri. There's a big difference there, I think. De Vries has been around against seasoned vets for a long time now.
And as well, the expectation based on the performances for the performance for Williams in Italy last year, like the expectation was much higher. I don't know if it was like something about the Alpha Tauri that didn't suit him, or just maybe Red Bull just wasn't getting the support he needed from the team and from Red Bull. But yeah, it definitely seemed. I mean, it seemed quite early on that they felt like they'd made a mistake. I do think they booted him out too soon. I think it was unfair. I think he deserved a chance to
give the guy a full season.
I think he deserved a season.
They weren't competing for anything. Had they been a front-running team in a scenario where he was never finishing in the points and the car was capable of winning races, then yeah, fair enough. Like,
I mean,
do the Red Bull thing, but this car was going nowhere. This car wasn't capable of much in a good weekend. It was. I'd say it's comfortably the worst car on the grid, maybe tied with the Haas for that in terms of race pace.
Probably. So I think there's a dynamic here that we're not taking into account, and that's the Perez dynamic. I think the whole reason this happened in the first place, without getting into too much detail, is if Perez had been performing to the standard that they expect Perez to perform, then I don't think they'd be worrying too much about De Vries. No. But they're thinking, we need to get. We're looking like, Perez is not going to be doing the business for us anymore. We need to get someone warmed up in the other car so that we've got a replacement for it. If we're being really honest, that's what's going on here. It's plain to see.
Yeah.
If De Vries had matched Tsunoda's point scoring, they'd still be last. So there's no way there's a championship fight argument there, really. Yeah. So
no arguments to moving from D then.
But I think he has to. Yeah, I can't say anything to justify anything higher than a D. So that's where it's going to have to be.
Let's do the only driver that's competed in every event for the team next, which is Tsunoda. Just for record, it's Tsunoda. I think Yuki is having as good a season you can in a car like the one that they have, and has had glimmers of, I would probably say, outperforming the car. And I think for that, I would personally want to kind of put him in the B category. I feel like he's kind of basically doing what Hulkenberg's done, which is these flashes of, wow, I did not expect that from that car, but overall not being able to maintain that, which is quite likely a factor of the car, same as it is for Hulkenberg. But some people consistently outperform the car. Some people like Hulkenberg and Yuki are capable of flash qualifying performances or specific good races, but not the consistency of doing it all the time. So I feel like he's in that same sort of ballpark is where I want to put him.
Right. I think we're close. We're close here.
Okay. That's good. That's good.
I think he's, if you're rating this in that granular way of sort of, putting the best at the front and the worst at the back of the tier, then he's either just ahead of Perez or just behind Perez, I think. Because if he was that far ahead of Perez. I think if he's a top B, he's replacing Perez already. If he was performing that well, they'd be turfing Perez.
Wait, hang on. So are you putting him high C then? Like a C but better than Perez, basically?
I'm either putting him a low B or just
a
ahead
high
of
C.
Perez, or a high C just behind Perez. And I can't really... I don't think I can put him better than Perez.
Okay. I see the logic there because...
I do.
Perez has obviously... I mean, Perez is a driver that, yes, fair enough, he's in the best car on the grid, but he is still sat second in the championship.
And he's won races.
And he's won races, yeah. And he's had a number of podium finishes.
And I just don't think Tsunoda would have... The races that Perez has won, I don't think Tsunoda would have if he was in that car. So that's why he has to go behind Perez for me. So it has to be sort of anywhere behind Perez, really. He's in the C. It doesn't really matter as long as he's not ahead of Perez.
So Chris, you're probably going to decide this, I think.
What do you think, Chris?
I do want to put him in B, and I will tell you why.
Tell me.
Like he's in arguably the worst car on the grid, maybe tied with Haas, depending on the track. But in that car, he's had some really phenomenal drives. And if you think about, Yuki used to have a reputation of being pretty fast, crashed a lot. He's not retired once this season. He's put in some really good performances. And above everything else, I think when there's all this talk about the Red Bull seat and what will happen if they decide to get rid of Perez, the fact that Tsunoda's even put himself in that conversation is not where I thought he would be. If you asked me this, even this time last year, probably, I would have thought you were mad to think he'd be in that conversation at this point. But he's done enough this year to, as much as I don't really believe he is going to get that seat with Ricciardo now in the mix, the fact he's even put himself in a conversation, I think is really impressive. So I can go for a B for him.
Okay.
You've convinced me. There we go. Fine, B. Fine.
Okay. And then last, the gent who has only done 2 races so far this season, and that is Danny Rick. I feel like,
we can't leave him out, but also
this is the one that's
have 2 races.
Very, very difficult in my opinion, because it's too early to really tell. This is why literally before we recorded this, I said, are we actually going to put Danny Rick in these, or are we going to do him at the end of the season?
I think it'd be incomplete if we didn't have Danny Rick
Yeah.
in there, so it has to be there. I think really for what we've seen so far, we haven't really seen everything that he's capable of this season. He's had 2 races to have a go at it. He's coming in from a 6-month break, well, half a season break. I think you've got to put him B. Just it's not fair to hate on him for not doing as well as you might expect. It's not fair to put him any higher than a B because we haven't seen enough from him.
Just drop him in the middle.
So just stick him slap bang in the middle,
Yeah, and he's been sort of pretty close to Yuki at times in these two race weekends so far. That I think that it shows. Yeah, it shows like what you would expect someone that's been around the sport as long as he has coming back. In the same way that Hulkenberg, we were saying earlier, has come back and had these moments that show why they brought him back. I think Danny Rick will hopefully do the same in the rest of the season. So there we have it. That is our tier ranking for the midpoint.
I'm pretty happy with
season.
that.
Yeah, I think that looks about right. I think, it's a sensible ranking. And having more in the middle there along the B is about how any ranking should look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could all individually make arguments to move the odd driver up or down one, but I think as a nice average, I'm pretty happy with that.
I am dreading putting this on YouTube. I think there's a lot of people commenting.
Well,
I hope
think
there's a lot of people commenting on YouTube. I'd love to.
Yeah, and please do send us your rankings as well. I'd be really interested to see what you as listeners think and where you disagree with us and where you do agree with us. So please do send in your rankings.
Right, we need to rattle through this inbox stuff.
Yeah,
quickly. We don't have much time.
Get some
inbox
done.
Keep it saying now. But stay up. Box. Hey man.
I'll take the first one.
Go for it.
Darth Kilowog says, "Hey man, what's going on with Alpine? Oh my god."
Nice quick one.
Not a quick question to answer. What's going on with Alpine? Do you think that brand will be on the grid in 2026, or will a Renault-powered car, well, it's already a Renault-powered car.
But I think it means, will a Renault-powered car even be on the grid next
be there
year?
at all? Yeah, I think it will.
Yeah, it will. I don't think they're going anywhere. I mean, I imagine at some point over the summer break, we're going to end up talking about Alpine again, because it's looking more and more likely that Mattia Binotto is going to be stepping into that team. I mean, the short version of what's going on is it appears the top brass don't have a whole lot of patience.
Yeah, looks that way.
But yeah, I think we'll talk about this a lot more in coming weeks, because this is going to keep rumbling for a while.
Yeah, we need to let this develop a little bit more, I think, before we sort of draw any firm conclusions. But I do think I'm sad to see Otmar going. I think he's one of my favourite personalities in all of Formula One. He's just like seems like such a nice guy.
He's going to get snapped up very quickly by another team, I imagine.
Yeah, I hope so. Next one.
Next one from Wesley. Hey man, it appears that Aston Martin have got caught doing something the FIA says they shouldn't have been. Discussion here in the Discord is that finding and exploiting loopholes is at the very heart and nature of F1. Would you agree? Is it wrong to live by the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law? Is the onus on the FIA to make sure teams know what is intended by a specific rule and therefore should capitalise on the fact that said rule is poorly written?
I think just going to the last specific bit of that, the FIA making sure that it's known what's intended by a rule so that it's not possible to circumvent it. Yes, I think it is the FIA's duty to write rules in a way that they can't be circumvented or misconstrued. And if there is an unfortunate oversight, then they have to deal with that in an appropriate manner. I think DAS for Mercedes a couple of years ago was probably the right way to deal with it. So there was a loophole that allowed them to use the way that they were moving the steering column to make the adjustments, didn't break any of the rules that were written, but it was a little bit of a twisting of the wording to basically say, well, we're not actually breaking this rule because we're doing it like this. So the easy thing was, okay, it will be outlawed from the end of the season. The rule will be changed to accommodate as such. Done. And that's the right. You can't just take it off them immediately, because that's not fair. But what you can do is at least with some dignity close the loophole and then continue on without it.
I agree. I think the F duct was another good example.
Yeah.
Like they were like, yeah, this is fine. Everyone started developing it. It started to get a bit silly, and you had drivers taking flat out corners one-handed, at which point they were like, okay, we're going to nip this in the bud now. It's getting silly. And the double diffusion in 2009, same thing. Like, yeah, well done. You found a loophole. Everybody else, it's the onus is on them to catch up developments. Like that's, it is the part of the nature of F1. Like, and we've said before, I can't remember exactly what technical thing we were talking about at the time, but we've said a few times before, ultimately, the smartest people in these areas aren't working for the FIA writing rules. They're working for race teams. Yeah. So there's no way that the people writing the rules are ever going to think of as many like variants of these rules as the people designing the cars.
It's just they have a totally different mindset is the thing. They're writing rules as the ruler, and the people sort of designing components from the rules are creatives who are always looking for a way around the rule to implement what they want to do. And if they can find a way around it, then they're always going to do that. So I actually quite like that aspect of Formula One. I think it's fun. It's a fun challenge for the teams to try and overcome the rule book in a way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think the onus is on the FIA to write watertight rules. I think there's lots of areas where the rule book could be tightened up, especially in terms of sporting regulations as well. So there's definitely room for improvement. But I think, also part of the magic of the technical rule set is definitely the ability of the teams to interpret rules. Yeah, how they see fit.
I'm just glad that this Aston Martin thing doesn't appear to be anywhere near as bad as what allegedly was Ferrari, like just flagrantly breaking a rule and then settling it behind closed doors. It doesn't seem to be that bad. And I think That's the side that I don't like. If the rule twisting and wording twisting, I think, is part of the sport, and the FIA just have to deal with it in a dignified manner, which they don't always, but they appear to be getting better in the last couple of years with that, I think. So,
well, I'll never forget Sergio Perez getting back to the pits at Belgium under his own power.
Under his own power on the back of a truck.
Yeah. Nonsense.
Yeah.
Next one.
Charlie Brigden says, if the current F1 tracks were people, who would be the most fun to go to dinner with? And which one would you avoid at parties? What a summer break question if I ever saw one.
I've got an answer for that. I think the most fun's going to be like a Spa or a Monza, because they're going to have like decades of all the best stories to tell.
Good food as well.
Yeah.
Great food. And then at parties, I would avoid Monaco, because they're all style but not a whole lot of substance.
I can't. Do you know what? I can't
Very
suggest anything better than that.
But not much to actually bring to the table.
I can't suggest anything better than that.
That's great. Next one. Next one is Stephen H. Hey man, let's say you're in charge of marketing for F1. Stephen appears to work for F1 in their marketing department. Trying to sustain the growth, especially in the US. What would be your selling points right now for F1, other than it's a great way to learn the Dutch national anthem?
It's a good question. I don't think F1 do enough around the tech side of things. Like, there's so many impressive figures and numbers from the tech side of things. Like, the power of the engines and the amount of G-force that they pull and the braking power and stuff. Like, if you can present those kind of mind-blowing physics things in a kind of exciting, consumer-friendly kind of way, I think they're missing a trick a little bit, like, with that. Like, last year, partway through the year, that suddenly was like that, oh, we've remembered that we're hybrids, so we're going to sort of mention that every week, but they didn't really do anything with it. Like, yeah, I think there's more to that.
Okay, my answer to that question is a simple one. It's give more budget to the social media team and let them make better content.
Yeah.
There you go. That's as simple as that for me.
Pretty easy way to do it. It's Chris on this one.
It is me. From Pete Sturt. Hey man, wild suggestion for the DRS rule. Drivers get DRS when within 2 seconds of the car in front, but then it automatically shuts off when within 1 second. It'll keep the pack bunched, but ensure drivers actually have to do the hard work to overtake. Thoughts?
I see the logic.
Here's one.
I see the logic.
Here's an idea. Just get rid of DRS. Just don't have DRS anymore. Have a formula that cars can... We now have a formula where cars can follow each other in theory, although they seem to be following each other less well this year.
Yeah.
I think maybe roll back some of the changes or at least make some changes to make the following easier again.
Yeah.
And then just get rid of DRS altogether. I genuinely, there are places where we don't even need it at the moment on the calendar.
Yeah.
But they have to have it at every race because it's part of the rule set, and they've all developed DRS, so why not? But yeah, I think it's a shame when, when a car overtakes and then gets a second advantage further down, like they can just pull away, so you can't even fight the overtake that's just happened to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I don't know about this. I think maybe as well, like we've discussed this kind of stuff in the past. I think a better solution is also freeing up DRS and allowing people to use it in a defensive way and an attacking way. So making it so you have a limited number of applications of DRS across a race distance, and you can use them at your leisure. You can use it to pull a gap, or you can use it to attack, or you can use it to defend. And then once you've run out of them, if the person behind you still got it, then you're vulnerable, and that's fair and square. But I think give everyone the option to use it more strategically rather than base it on a distance and a track marker. I don't think that's quite the best way of doing it anymore.
Yeah. I'd be interested to at least have some sort of trial run of a race where they do it with that format. Like, I don't know, use a sprint race to
Maybe.
trial something like that or something.
Yeah.
Like, have a sprint race so you can have 5 applications of DRS, use them when you see fit. Or
Somewhere like
something.
Austria.
I'll give him.
Well,
give him.
no,
Like,
but I mean,
how many laps
obviously,
you got in a sprint race.
it depends on the circuit,
15,
doesn't
20?
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like enough
But
for
there's
one per
multiple
lap or
places on
something.
track.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's multiple
So-
places on track where you can apply it. So maybe you
Yeah.
give everyone, say, 10 or 15 over a
Yeah.
20 lap race. And yeah, see what happens. Next one.
Yeah, next one. Katie says, "Hi guys, do you think there was or is a little bit of arrogance from the Mercedes design and aero team in the fact that it took them so long to make the changes needed to the design of the 22-23 car and go more towards the Red Bull philosophy? Or did they go so far down their own rabbit hole, it's actually just taken them longer than it maybe would have to get back to that level equal and then be able to compete with the rest of the midfield? Also, any thoughts on how Neil's Wittich is doing? Stu's just highlighted over that, so I can't read the rest of it. Yeah, personally think he's doing a good job and there's a lot less controversy at the moment.
Yeah, he's doing great.
He is doing a good job.
I think that there have been 1 or 2 questionable decisions from stewards in recent races, but
We definitely talk
that
about stewarding a lot less this year than we have in recent years.
On
I
the
think
whole,
if nothing
It's
else,
getting
that's a
better,
good
isn't
measure.
it? And
Yeah.
that's the important thing. It's getting better.
Yeah, in terms of Mercedes, I think they went down the rabbit hole too far, and I think that the sounds coming out of Mercedes, it sounds like they didn't actually see when they were doing their own tests on their own versions of what Red Bull have got. They weren't seeing any benefit, but I think they were so far down that rabbit hole that I think they developed themselves into a corner, and it took them a long time to realize that they weren't going to get any more performance from it. I think the philosophy has to be you take your own direction, and if you're just going to do the same as what other teams do, then you're not going to get ahead of other teams necessarily, or it's going to be much more difficult to do what a team is already doing better than them. So I think there's still a lot of work to do at Mercedes. I think they're looking for something. The best they can do is match Red Bull at the moment, and then it's down to the drivers, isn't it, to exploit the car better.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
final one. Everyone ready for the final one?
Yeah.
From this is Mrs. KB on YouTube. This is Kiora Bro from New Zealand. Thanks for making an awesome podcast. We've been through about a year, plus catching up on many episodes from previous seasons. Could you please explain why some cars are better on tires, are better or worse on tires, considering the rate of degradation, getting them up to optimal temperature quickly or not, and everything else that would help performance? Many thanks, Karen. Thank you for listening. That is a kind of a tricky one. It's all to do with aero balance and suspension and the way the driver's driving. It's a very dynamic aspect of a Formula One car, isn't it? Tire temperature. It's not any car actually.
Yeah. It is a very delicate thing as well, which is why teams will sometimes find it hard to get out of that rut that they're in. Like Haas, from a funds and resource point of view, are really struggling to develop a race config that essentially is also kind on the tyres. I mean, in simplest terms, it's about things like what you'll hear referred to in coverage of a lot for more simple terms is like the scrubbing, like the sideways movement. Obviously, a car that's moving more back and forth sideways in cornering is going to immediately have much more of that graining effect, the bubbling up of the tyres, because the tyre is not making the intended directional movement on the tarmac that it's supposed to.
Well, it's not heating evenly. What you want is the tyre to heat evenly across the tyre from the core of the tyre. You want core temperature. You don't want spikes of surface temperature, because that's when parts of your tyre melt off and come off, and that's when you get excessive graining and things like that you talk about. But it is all dependent on the level of downforce, the way the suspension set up, the camber caster, all of that, ride height. Every dynamic around a Formula One car has an influence on this, so it's not a simple thing to to just say, oh, we're going to make a car that now is better on its tyres, because everything on that car has to go hand in hand for that to be a feature of that car's handling.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a very, very difficult one to explain, but obviously tyres are very, very important in Formula One. We talk about them a lot on this podcast, and I hate talking about tyres because of the most boring aspect of the sport.
I mean, what we say must be valuable to some people for the questions to always come. We must say something of value to people at least.
Yeah. So I hope that mostly answers your question. It's basically, the answer is pretty much everything has an impact on it. Yeah, that's all I got for you.
Yeah. And that rounds off Inbox quite well with some time talk. But yeah, that is it for this week. So thank you to everyone who's joined us. With it being the summer break, we will be doing a couple more episodes like this, kind of reviews or just other bits of news to discuss and bits from throughout the season, as well as obviously then as we get closer to Zandvoort, the look ahead to that in a few weeks. So make sure you stay with us. Easiest way to follow us is all the social media platforms, whatever Twitter's called these days, Facebook and Instagram. You can find us by searching for Back of the Grid. You can find us through our Patreon at patreon.com/backofthegrid, which gets you access to our Discord if you get involved through that, which is an awesome little community with the benefits of being able to interact with us live and just chat with us through the week and during race weekends and so on. And then, of course, those of you who have been watching us on YouTube, very much appreciated. And as we said at the top of the show, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please subscribe. Please hit the bell icon for all the notifications of when we actually put a new episode out. And of course, hit the like button on the episodes. It does always help out and gets us in the algorithm to share with your friends and other F1 fans.
I hate that term.
All hail the algorithm.
All hail the algorithm. So, but that is it for this week. Yeah. Thank you to everyone who has joined us, and we will see you soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.